Sorry. So this webinar is organized by the Committee on Fiscal Studies. This is the 8th panel webinar. And CFS is a multidisciplinary committee with representatives from the Law School, School of Business, Institute of Development Studies, and several other institutions of higher learning. The committee has interest in fiscal law, which links the collection of revenue to its spending. So, and they're working together with other institutions like University of Nairobi, Oxfam, Open Society, and Friedrich Ember Stiftung. Today's webinar has the title Coping with Natural Disasters During the COVID-19 Pandemic and the Role of Science informing policy for disaster risk reduction. We know that in addition to the disruption and termination of many socio-economic activities caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, which we have been seeing in Kenya, many Kenyans are also dealing with the effects of natural disaster, such as flooding, landslides, and locust infestations. And we are going to hear a lot more about that from our presenters this morning. I will be your moderator for this webinar. My name is Professor Agnes Muthombe from School of Biological Sciences, University of Nairobi. This webinar will last for 2 hours with 4 speakers, each giving a 10-minute talk, followed by a 10-minute plenary session. After that, we shall have a time of question and answers. So participants can post your questions at the chat and indicate the speaker that the question is directed to so that you can deal with that at the end of the session. We shall also have a 5 to 10 minutes plenary and also some questions. Kindly remember to mute your mic throughout the session, except for the speaker during their presentation. That will help us to be quiet. So our speakers this morning, we have 4 panelists. Our first panelist is Dr. Joseph Mutemi. Dr. Mutemi is a researcher at the University of Nairobi and has interest in science of weather and climate dynamics. Dr. Mutemi, his experiences in science of weather and climate ranging from applying the laws of thermodynamics to solve the problem of weather and climate from day-to-day conditions to long-term change projections. He's hands-on science and leader and a team leader of several high-ed weather and climate science initiatives, including African Science for Weather Information and Forecasting Techniques, which is also shortened as SWIFT. And this is a partnership which is funded by UK Research and Innovation as part of Global Challenge Research Fund. Dr. Mutemi is also serving the international community as a lead author in IPCC, the 6th assessment report. Our second panelist is Dr. Rukoba, who is a senior lecturer and director, School of Biological Sciences, University of Nairobi. She's a taxonomist and economic botanist who has worked extensively on the economically important plants in East Africa. She's the current chair of the CPPS 2020 Research Week Conference Committee. She also chairs the National Products Network of Eastern and Central Africa and is the secretary to the Society of Economic Botany, has a wide experience in that area of botany. And our third panelist is Professor Shem Wadiga, a chemist professor at the University of Nairobi. The professor is currently the acting director, Institute of Climate Change and Adaptation, ICCA, University of Nairobi. He has extensive, wide research interests, for example, the sources and sinks of biogenic gases, oral chlorine pesticides, and trace substances, to issues of great concern to humans, including the problem of climate change and our weather. And our fourth and last panelist is Professor Francis Matua, a professor of hydrology and hydraulics, University of Nairobi. Professor Matua has extensive experience in operational hydrology and serves in many national and international engagements and initiatives on the management of water resources within and beyond our national borders. In Professor Mutua's national assignment is provision of guidance on the safety of populations against disaster, which can be hydrological in nature, and how hydrological systems, including high capacity dams, should be designed to store massive volumes of runoff water while protecting lives and property. So we will have a plenary with two speakers, Tijan Ahmad and Afsin Bohim, who are both researchers with the Committee on Fiscal Studies. So we'll start with our first speaker, Dr. Mutemi. And Dr. Mutemi, kindly remember that you have 10 minutes to do your presentation, and for everyone else, kindly mute your mic while we are listening. Thank you. Dr. Mutemi, to you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this talk on exactly what we are doing in order to ensure that as we cope with the stressing COVID situation, we are also, at the end of the game in terms of provision of relevant weather information. As you have actually seen that since beginning of March to date, actually up to mid-May, we have been under very, very stressing weather situation. And of course, as we do the science, the question is if this is getting the attention it needs in terms of the applicability of the information. But just to start this off, I want us to appreciate that actually the first and the foremost, the storm is actually gone, thanks to the behavior of the controls of high impact weather. So this here is a recent current forecast pattern of where we are expecting weather to continue to still be a bit of concern over the country and beyond. And you can see the forecast now really is we still expect moderately intense weather to continue mainly over the Lake Basin, parts of the Western Kenya highlands, and a little bit of the coastal strip. Actually, recently, yesterday, I think we still had a bit of agonizing weather afflicting Mombasa, but that is short-lived. And so the point to make here is that even if we went back to last year, end of last year, and the beginning of this year, we were at the top of the game when it came to providing accurate weather information, and this is due to a strong partnership which we researchers in the University of Nairobi, and actually as you are going to see, the practice all over the world is a strong partnership between the service providers who are the mandated national institutions, the Met services, and ourselves researchers. And the question is, what do we have in order to be able to provide this information, which actually is critical for the protection of lives and property. That is the core mandate of weather services, and that is exactly what we researchers try to address in terms of addressing the methodologies. And I want to highlight here that first and foremost is the fact that we have the necessary human resources, human capital as it is, and that is the greatest resource, because you need experts to be able to work on the problem, to solve the problems with the necessary skills. And this, of course, goes with an existence of good and dense observational network, because as you realize, we must take measurements of water vapor, we must take measurements of heat, we must be able to measure radiation and direct sunlight, and also energy disappearing, and also be able to synthesize this information in terms of where are the storms going, where the storms are coming, and where they are going to be decaying, so that we can be able to provide the information. And the most important, and very important for us actually, is that we very much have to have at our fingertips very high-end physical models. This will mainly be mathematical kind of laboratories informed by the principles of thermodynamics. And this, again, we shall always be relying on the current computing technology. So usually the people who will keep the computer manufacturers on their feet in terms of providing the highest possible performance computing technology. But this also is informed by an international framework of exchange of data sets, because it is data sets which at least will be able to make us be able to generate a snapshot of the instantaneous state of the atmosphere and how this is evolving in various sub-regions of the world, including ourselves. So the global telecommunication network is very, very coined this, and you can see that particular snapshot from the WMO, the World Organization, whose mandate is to unify the international collaboration in this undertaking. That being said, I want to just highlight from this slide some of the research outputs, which also translate to operational models and schemes. Like you can see, the map on the left is, of course, the storms were afflicting us during April. This particular snapshot is for March, is for 24th April. This I think was the one of the storms which led to massive torrential rainfall and all the impacts we had. And you can see the other panel on the left, the right is actually some of the detailed scientific analysis and attributes which we researchers have to lay our fingers on. That particular pattern you see there, for example, is a depiction of rotational character of the circulation, and we can also be able to do a lot of things. For example, wave dynamics, you can be able to delineate the structure of the systems and their transient characteristics. And this kind of science is very, very deep. It requires a lot of work and required a lot of devotion by early career scientists and also ourselves to keep guiding the development. And we believe that this work is has to go to the next level, because what you realize is that there will be attributes which usually will behave in the same way. So to a large extent, we can use mathematics. To a large extent, there is also some attributes which always will have an extra behavior which actually is unique in its own sense. So there is also what we call nonlinearity, and we have to take a lot of time, a lot of thought in order to be able to address these issues scientifically. So we keep the science of physics, the science of all branches of mathematics at work, and it takes us a lot of time to be able to do this. But we don't complain. We think that it is very, very important to be able to understand things always to the next degree of knowledge. Having said that, for example, I just want to start moving towards the end. You can see, for example, on this left panel over here, the green is the cumulative precipitation rainfall, actually since the beginning of March all the way to the end of May, just a few days ago. And of course, we had extremely heavy rainfall being experienced all over the place. And the middle two maps over there, because this is one of the kind of surprises of weather, because last year around this time, mid-May, actually, you can remember the devastating cyclones and all the disaster and agonies which occurred over Southern Africa. And actually, there was not much happening over East Africa, over Kenya in particular. But we can recall this particular episode which occurred on 24th May. And actually, Mombasa was really a kind of a total mess. And the question which we are posing here is that where is the problem? And the problem, of course, is that the provider of the scientific information has such intense time and a lot of work to do in terms of getting the models to work better, and of course always increasing the skill and the science to the next level. And the forecaster and the weather provider is therefore not also the agency which will take necessary actions. So I think the point here is that as we address the problem of the uptake of the information, we have to sensitize more the planners, the mandated agencies, the disaster, the disaster agencies, the transport management units, and this is the way forward, so that there can be what we are starting to characterize in the practice as the concept of co-production, working together to ensure that what we produce, as we strive to take it to the next level, then the actor and the uptaker of the information uses it to actually manage and implement those decisions, which actually translates to protecting lives and the property. And just to show what we are doing in the international context over and above what the moderator read out, I want to highlight one initiative which actually is a kind of a large-scale collaborative scientific effort between ourselves in Africa and the partners in the UK, and this is the Science of Weather Forecasting and the Techniques program. We give it an acronym SWIFT. We actually are funded by under the Global Research Challenges and Grants from the DFID through the UK Research Council. And we are a partnership of 16 institutions, actually, 16 institutions. You can see that pie chart which I just put there to depict the kind of anticipated capacity. You can notice that institutions ourselves in Africa, we actually are the majority, so we have the lion's share of the cake in terms of the distribution of the resources and also the tasks we are doing. And this is because we believe that as we train and do the science, we also need to leave a lot of capacity behind so that there can be living legacy. And within this partnership institutions, we have always an operational center and also such institution. And in Kenya and East Africa, ourselves are partnering with the Kenya Met. So I think in this particular show mode, UON, which I'm leading in, is actually below the Kenya Met. And this initiative is doing a lot of work in terms of not only helping us to collaborate more strongly, researchers and also service information providers like the med services, but also in the training and the awarding of fellowships to our early career scientists. So we have in this program good fellowships. For the first time, I think, within the School of Physical Sciences, we are hosting quite a number of postdocs who are actually addressing the aspect of the linkage of weather information with societal practices. And this, I think, is the way forward. So I want to really thank the audience for this attention, and we welcome your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mutemi, for that presentation. We move to the next one, Dr. Rukoba. Kindly keep it 10 minutes. Thank you. Dr. Rukoba, we can't hear you.
Your mic is off.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I'm looking at the effects of the desert locust invasion in the face of COVID-19 pandemic. And one of the things that we notice is that they have coincided. In fact, today, because of COVID, we seem even to have forgotten that there are areas that are under locust invasion. Now, locust invasion is actually a natural disaster. In the Bible, it's been considered a plague. Kenya today is experiencing the worst invasion in 70 years. Now, this particular invasion is said to have started in Saudi Arabia and has traveled more than 5,600 kilometers up to where we are in our country. And if we look at these invasions that occur, locust invasions, they actually affect a very big portion of the Earth's surface. In fact, about a fifth of the Earth's surface. And also they travel very, very quickly, about 150 kilometers a day. So within just a few days, they actually can cover a very large area. Now, our problem is that this particular invasion has occurred just when COVID-19 has also occurred. Now, if we look at the areas where we have locust invasion and also coincide with COVID, we notice areas like Mandera, Turkana, and parts of the central, like Kajiado areas. Those areas have both locust invasion and COVID, and therefore the people in those areas, the rural population, are undergoing a lot of stress. Now, some of the impacts of this COVID and locust invasion are as follows. For example, we have psychological stress and a feeling of insecurity. So in both, we find there is fear, there is stigma, there is the fear of COVID infection. There's a fear that the COVID, if you get infected, you will not be able to get treatment or afford treatment. And then there is also the security that has come with it. We know today that with COVID, there is partial lockdown, there is curfew, and all these have put stress on people in those areas. Another impact is loss of livelihood. Now, locusts, of course, everywhere they go, they destroy everything in their path. And so both farmers and pastoralists are affected in those areas. They don't have food, they don't have pasture for their animals. And therefore, with that, they don't have a livelihood. They can't make money. They can't look after their families with the output of their work, because that is completely destroyed. Now, come in COVID-19, and you can see the complication there. So already, even in areas that are not, don't have locust invasion, there are already problems like jobs, the lockdown, they can't go to look for food and so on. So you can imagine when you have the twin disasters, then the problems there are really, really big. Of course, there is food insecurity. And this actually goes for the whole country. There's food insecurity because of loss of the crops due to the locust invasion. And therefore, there are thousands of people who are now vulnerable and face hunger and poverty. We also have lack of access to essential services like transport. Even now with COVID, you can see areas where we don't have medical, like the PPEs, the masks in good supply. And so in areas that also have the locust invasion, those problems are compounded. And of course, finally, maybe also quite long term, is that in those areas where we have the twin disasters, there's going to be famine and environmental wasteland. Now, how can we cope with these problems? What strategies can we adopt? Now, first and foremost, we need that humanitarian phase. We need humanitarian assistance, food and drugs, medicines be supplied to vulnerable groups. So it means that we really need to identify who are the vulnerable groups. And those that are experiencing multiple disasters are very vulnerable, as we see in the locust invasion areas. So we need to identify these people and supply them with those needs that they require. And it's actually a requirement even for disaster management protocols that they must be given what they need to survive. Another thing is that there has to be education. Now with COVID, we can't walk around the way we did. And there must be education to the people on how they can protect themselves against COVID-19. Okay, another thing is continued surveillance, community engagement. The community must be engaged. We must know what they require. Not all communities are the same, and their requirements must be identified. And so what do the communities, for example, in Mandera that are experiencing both COVID and locust invasion, what are their unique requirements? And then in those areas, we also, for locust management, we need to train them on how to identify locust areas, like where are eggs being laid by the locust. Because once we know where the eggs are being laid, then we can actually intervene. So that kind of training must go out. And as they do this surveillance, they must also understand social distancing so that they also don't get infected with COVID-19. Of course, they will be spraying in order to minimize the effects of the locust. But what kind of sprays? Normally, we've used the chemical sprays. They're usually very harmful. But today we have alternatives. We have other, biopesticides, which have not really been used very much, but are known to work. We also have botanical pesticides. Now, as we introduce these, we also need to observe the effects on COVID. So we must have the usual hygiene and social distancing. Now, what is the role of research in locust management in this era of COVID? Well, one of the things, and particularly for universities and research institutions, is that we need to undertake intensive research on the locust behavior and to see what causes locust swarms to occur. We know locusts are actually, the swarms, the desert locusts that we see swarming, actually can exist solitary. So what causes them to become gregarious? So we need to understand the change in behavior so that we can be able to stop the swarms before they begin. And there are certain research that have occurred in various institutions. For example, we know there are some hormones and chemicals that are produced by the locust that can inhibit or accelerate the move from solitary to gregarious. And so we need to understand these chemicals and this type of research so that we can use that information to bring down the severity of locust invasion. There are also biological control methods that have worked. We have certain fungi that can kill locusts within 14 days, and we need to work on that. We also have the genomics approach. The genomics approach is where we study the genes that are expressed in the gregarious and in the solitary forms of the locust. Once we get that, then we can actually use that information to control the locust. Now, another place where research is important is in agricultural choices. What are we planting? How are we planting? What methods are we using? We need, because one of the causes of the locust invasion is the changes that are occurring, like climate change. We've seen climate change in the first presentation. And climate change it really causes changes in locust gregarious disease. And we need to understand how to sort of block that by the way we choose the plants that we grow. So another thing is also to introduce in areas where we have, that are vulnerable to locust invasion, we need to introduce natural predators. I looked at one rather amusing one in China, and what they did is that they released thousands of chickens in an area that was infested, and that brought down the locust. So maybe chicken may not be the way to go in our areas, but we can also look for other natural predators. And also, there are certain plants we know, we call them pesticidal plants. I'm a plant person, so that's really my area. There are certain plants that can be used and we can grow them in many of these areas so as to bring down the severity of locust invasion. And just also to introduce, we have the CBPS conference coming up in October this year. And one of the things that we are looking for are presentations in areas like this, where we have emerging natural disasters, like the locust or any other, and COVID. And we are inviting all members to join and present their work. All you need to do is go to the university website and just look for University Research Week, and you'll be able to access the presentations or the themes that you can make your presentations in. Thank you very much.
Lukoba, for that nice presentation. We go to the next presenter, Professor Shem Wadiga. Thank you. Prof, kindly keep it 10 minutes. Thank you.
Shem, your mic, please. And Lukoba, you may have to switch off your mic.
That again. missed some of the introductory remarks because I had to restart again. And I would like to start by, first of all, saying that the Institute for Climate Change and Adaptation is an institute which looks at the history of weather. And therefore, we are different from the Department of Meteorology or the Met Department. Every one of us is proud of your history. And in looking at that history, we look at how the weather has treated us or mistreated us. And we also look at what can we do to mitigate that treatment or to adapt to that treatment. And that is what the Institute is doing. Let me go now to the topic of today. I want to start by saying that nature has given us 3 common goods that we cannot even pay or assess their cost. The first common good that nature has given us is quality air. Just think of yourself, without that quality air, none of us living organisms would survive. Then we have quality water, another free gift of nature, which is very critical for our survival. And lastly, quality food that we need in order for us to have energy to do whatever we want to do. Now, if you look at all those 3 qualities, 3 common goods, they are now threatened by several factors. I will try to mention just a few. The first one is the population. At the time of independence, Kenya's population was 7 million. We had the census last year, and we are now over 47 million. So that is almost 700 times, 700% increase in those 56 or so years. That means that we have to feed more people. And feeding more people, we'll have to increase agriculture, increase animal husbandry, increase all means of making food or creating food. We have to also look at the way we have increased the agriculture. That is driven by the population, because these people must be fed. And with that population, we have to deforest some of the areas that were being used by nature to provide the 3 common goods. Agriculture has greatly improved, and with it, trade has improved, and communication has improved, and all of these are going at depleting the quality of our 3 common goods. We have to also look at what we are doing to those 3 quality goods by trading, by moving, by cooking, by increasing. We are also increasing what we call greenhouse gases. The greenhouse gases are the gases that trap the sunlight radiation and changes it to the short or long wavelength to the microwave wavelength. And all of our microwave stoves cook very fast. And that is what is causing the changes in climate and the changes in temperature. But it is not uniform all over the world. Even in Kenya, it is not uniform. Let me move quickly to say that because of the changed temperature and humidity and forestry, we have also released the mobility of insects. So the vector-borne diseases, and here I want to say that the coronavirus, COVID-19, is just one of the vector-borne diseases that we have experienced and are experiencing. It is not the only one that we can talk of. There are also in our area chikungunya. Chikungunya is a mosquito spread viral disease, and it was first observed in Lamu in 1955. Chikungunya is there today. It has no cure. We have also encephalitis, which is caused by ticks. This is the enlargement of the brain. And again, it is a viral disease which is with us here, and we have to bear in mind that it is the weather which has made it spread further. Lastly, the Zika virus was first discovered in Uganda Zika forest. But we know during the last Olympic Games in Brazil, Zika virus was there and caused a lot of damage in creating encephalitis and maiming other things, other human children. Now, let me say here that the COVID-19 is a mind-changing and a mind-governing episode which we have now received because of its impact. Today, there are over 6 million people who have been infected by COVID-19. There are 365,361 deaths caused by COVID-19. And we have to humble ourselves and pray to God that He has led us without affected, and therefore we are here today. In Kenya, 2,216 as of today, and still rising. We have 74 deaths and 553 recoveries as of today. But let us not forget that as the COVID-19 is affecting Kenyans, there are already 194 Kenyans who have been killed by floods and landslide as the COVID-19 is also going on. So we have to moderate our thinking. Of course, the horror that the COVID-19 has brought is changing our thinking very fast, but we must not forget that there are other these viral diseases and floods and landslides, which we must also take into consideration because they are also as devastating as the COVID-19 and they don't have cures. The other aspect which the weather causes is disaster. In Africa, there are 1,699 major disasters with 708,712 deaths that has cost $832,459,000. This is enormous compared to COVID-19 today, other than the human lives. But it's even higher in human lives what disasters cause. And for that reason, it is important that we have to realize the history of the weather and see how we can mitigate it and adapt to it. We are not going to cure it, but we are going to live with it. With my concluding remarks are on the declared war that we have had on nature. In the revitalization of our economy, we have to reverse the thinking of fighting nature because nature doesn't forget. It fights back very viciously. And for that reason, we have to revitalize our economy by not looking at going to borrow money to build big projects which have limited employability, but we should borrow money to invest in revitalizing and assisting nature. By this I mean that it is time that we look at our rivers. They are not reinforced. Their banks are not reinforced, and they overflow most of the time. Certainly, we could reinforce the banks of our rivers so that we reduce the overflow. We can reduce the soil erosion that is going into the rivers by also looking at the agricultural practices that we do upstream. We can also look at the industries that are situated next to the rivers and make sure that they are clean and do not pollute the rivers. Furthermore, we can also look at how we can look at the issues that nature is crying for. And we will be able to create more employment assisting nature through the technologies that we have and the younger people that we have trained, and reinforcing the agricultural methods, reinforcing the industrial methods, so that nature is no longer a threat to us, but nature is a friend of us, and we work with nature to sustain our lives. Economic revolution that we are looking for and revitalization that we are looking for must work with nature in order for us to move forward. And we will employ more younger people if we work with nature and assist nature than if we work against nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you for that very enlightening discussion. We go to the last but not least, Professor Francis Matua. Keep it 10 minutes, please. Thank you.
Yes, and good morning to all. I believe you can be able to hear me, and you can also be able to see what I have projected on the screen. To assist the Agnes in managing time here, I have decided to use PowerPoint in order to be able to do this. And yes, we are talking about coping with natural disaster during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I want very quickly to mention that to date, there's a lot of controversy whether there are any natural disasters. Maybe in the tectonic, in the earthquakes, volcanoes, and tsunamis, and so on. But when you look at almost all other disasters that we have been experiencing, particularly in Africa, there is an ant. You can be able to trace a human ant into some of those disasters that we are having. Secondly, as we talk about disasters, I want to quickly point out that disasters are not bad. They introduce a risk, and there are two types of risk. You have the positives and you have the negatives. And unfortunately, humanity has been driven by fear to respect and keep away from hazards and risks because of the negative element of hazards. But hazards are not bad. Hazards, when they come with opportunities. It is just that we human beings have not been able to explore the positive dimensions of hazards. I want just in passing, if we forget the issue of legalities and ethics, and you imagine of a thief going to the bank, the thief, if he or she manages the risks well, would go into the bank and come out with millions of shillings will become a millionaire almost instantly. There are, of course, legal and ethical issues about this. But generally, we are failing to manage our risks because of the negativity that has been driven into our consciousness. Instead of looking the positivities, I believe even this COVID thing has many positive issues that we are shutting our eyes not to look at them. Now, we have been talking about floods in Kenya, no doubt, very devastating. But this year has been unique in itself because the floods are happening within the environment of COVID-19 and within the environment, partly within the environment of the Locust invasion, which has created a lot of problems. It's just that, like Lukoba said, we seem to have forgotten, but it is still there. So floods are not coming on board in isolation. And I want you to look at this diagram that I have just given you to summarize what I want to say. We have the locusts, we have the floods, we have the COVID thing, and all that is getting into the society. A society with its own vulnerabilities. And by the way, those vulnerability is the easiness with which an entity, a community, or a system is affected by change. There are basically 5 issues that define vulnerabilities. And you can write a whole book on any one of these ones. The environmental change, degradation, and all that kind of stuff, climate change, hostile neighbors. Notice hostile neighbors was very prominent within this environment of the COVID-19 because you couldn't trust your neighbor. Even if you shouted for help, your neighbor would really be very hesitant to just come and embrace you. So the hostility of neighbors here, although hostile is in quotes, was very prominent in what we were doing. And then the friendly trade partners, Uganda, Tanzania, you have been able to hear. And I just want to quickly mention that this friendly trade issues was very prominent for the Lake region, which has a huge, attachment to Tanzania through the Lake Victoria route. And that was kind of disturbed in this particular case. And number 5 is how the society responds to those 4 that I have made there. Now, all that put together, it integrates with the level or the capacity of the people to build back better. That's what is called the resilience of the people. The resilience is somehow tied up with the stability of the systems or the stability of the people where they live. So the permutations, when you add up and integrate locusts, COVID, floods, and resilience, you put that together in a pot, boil it, and you can get either the hazard that came through the system remains as a hazard and nobody's worried. And we have seen many places in Kenya where the flood came, it went through the system, it didn't destroy much. People cried a little bit, but they survived. But you add a flood that goes through the system, it was cooked, and it comes out as disaster with the lots of fatalities in it. Now, what I want at this point to mention is the flood that is killing people, can it be in isolation as a flood? And the answer is no. There is a hand of the COVID, there is a hand of the locust, and there is a hand of many other things. But we humans do not have an integrated mind. We prefer to look at issues in isolation. So we may have been looking at floods as floods, but believe me, there was nobody who died purely because of the flood. There must have been an element of the COVID in there. There must be an element of the locust. Some money may have been diverted to deal with the locusts. that should have been left behind to deal with that person who is dying of water in itself. That said, I want to quickly just mention this. When we deal with hazards, and I want to start from the left on this diagram that I'm showing you, when you want to deal with the hazard, like the floods that were there, ordinarily and conventionally and in science, you isolate the flood, you look at the threats. Threats would be the vulnerabilities, and you study the vulnerabilities to see how you can be able to put barriers in them and hopefully put a gate. You shut the gate so that the flood does not go any further than that. The blue line, vertical line, represents a gate that you can shut so that the effect can go through. But many times the gate is porous and you can get a disaster out of it. And then once the disaster happens, you have the recovery systems in there. You can recover these, you can recover the people and so on. But basically the recovery is based on PAIR, P-E-A-R, PAIR. You want to rescue people, you want to rescue the environment, the assets, or the reputation of the people. Now, remember the last thing that is shown there, the R, the reputation of the people. And you will remember how complicated it has been to bury our dead during this time. Whether the person dies because of direct issues of locusts, or dies because of floods, or dies even from the COVID itself. Very bad. The reputation that comes out there, we have not been able to recover that reputation that we are losing in there, besides the assets and the people themselves. But the point I'm trying to drive here is the conventional way of approach to dealing with floods, COVIDs, and locusts is failing completely in the days that we are in today, because there is no hazard, there is no risk that is going to come in isolation. There is always a compoundment of issues and risks. And what we left behind, you see below there, other risks, hazards, locusts, COVID, they have their own escalation controls that enter into your trial to put barriers into this. And these escalation controls go into your recovery things, and they destroy very easily. The second point I want to mention on this diagram is we in Africa and in some parts of the world, and I'm talking about Africa because I have quite a bit of experience in dealing with the disaster issues in Africa through IGAD, we tend to have policies and management strategies for disasters for the recovery part of a risk. We do not have the recovery part of the risk is what is called the reactive, putting reactive controls into this. All of us in Africa and in the developing world, we have a tendency to have very elaborate policies, DRM, disaster risk management policies, which are very strong in the reactive part. Why? Because it is easy when you go to a funeral and you assist people, you give them 100,000 or you give them 1 million, the impact as it originates from you is much bigger than if you funded the university with the same 100,000 to look at the proactive controls. And the proactive controls would be easier, they are easy to understand, they are easy to do. This is where science and universities are. The proactive, the reactive ones are more into the government things and politics. So we have left our policies more into the politics. That's where we are. So two things here which I wanted to say about this. One, the traditional way of dealing with floods and COVID and so on in isolation is actually useless. And allow me to use that word. It is not helping anybody. It is high time we started to look at a multi-flood or multi-risk analysis so that we can be able to understand and help our people correspondingly. This is again complicated by, when you want to deal with floods, we have 9 ways. It's like a template. You check, and you see whether you are doing the right thing or not. And you go to Europe, and in many places you see the blue. They are doing very well. But when you come to Kenya, you see the red there. It means we are doing very poorly, policy-wise and strategy-wise, to be able to deal with any type of disaster for that matter. And the same thing is the strategies, the interventions that you put to control a flood or COVID or whatever. Here I have an illustration of floods. There are about 12 strategic interventions for floods, for example. And you can see in many places in the developed world, the interventions are institutionalized. Whether we are politics, whether we change government, whether we go to politics, whatever, it's institutionalized and you cannot be able to change it. But you come to Kenya, the last column there, and you see issues of ad hoc, not consistent with the medium-term planning. Meaning, although we are policies, Kenya as a policy, as a disaster risk management policy, which is a box, is a closed box, where inside it you have floods, you have terrorism, you have everything. One weakness, because dealing with floods or dealing with disasters, dealing with floods like you would deal with terrorism or you would deal with drought, is a major fundamental flaw in itself. We as a country ought to have a flood risk management policy. We ought to have a pandemic risk management policy. We ought to have a drought management policy. Good thing is that we have one, but nothing. So floods coming and they kill as they want because they don't have a specific strategy that can help the people to deal with. So we have so many issues that we as academics need to assist the government. There is a big hole, the big, weakness in the way we deal with our disasters. And we keep complaining. I keep complaining myself. But the question is, what have I done? But I have reasons to this. What are the environments that my boss has made for me to be able to come on board? So, ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to mention that, yes, we have all these problems, and the problems are coming because we are dealing with them in isolation, in not integrating them. Nobody dies of one hazard per se in this world, and we tend. Nobody will die of COVID 100%. There must be another driving factor in the background, whether it will be the prominent or whether it will be the weakness. And ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say thank you very much. I want to stop sharing, and I have just shut my microphone. Asante sana.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you for that presentation. I think now we can move on to the plenary, and I will give the two speakers each 5 minutes of presentation. We have Tijan Ahmad and Afshim Borim. They can decide who starts. Thank you. 5 minutes each. And remember to put your questions in the chat, and we can look at them at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Agnes. I'll start by saying that climate change is a global problem, but the problem is not just environmental because it has an impact on multiple sectors. So recurring disasters have a significant impact on livelihoods, economic development, and the economic cost of the disasters ends up taking the country back in its fight against poverty, and it destroys our resilience and adaptation capacities, and it consequently slows down the attainment of SDGs and the country's national goals. So Kenya is a climate vulnerable country, and it's experiencing extreme weather events at an alarming rate and immense intensity. And the emergence of COVID-19 in such a situation, it exacerbates an already fragile situation because social and economic activities are disrupted and multiple sectors are suffering. And dealing with COVID-19 and natural disasters at the same time is causing a major strain on our already insufficient resources. So if we look at the healthcare system, for example, it would face increased pressure due to the virus and injuries from natural disasters and the risk of persons contracting waterborne diseases. More than anything, I think the situation sheds light on how much more we need to do to strengthen our disaster risk management capacities. So one way is to focus on holistic disaster reduction, and we need to move beyond strengthening short-term emergency management and instead focus capacity building intervention, strengthening longer-term prevention, mitigation. And so this includes capacity building to consider, among other things, how risks may change over time. So the International Center for Humanitarian Affairs calls for increased focus on the use of climate science to develop scientific knowledge and capacities to understand the present risks and how these may be different from the future risks so that they can give us an early warning, and it provides an opportunity to reduce risks and exposure to hazards. Also, attribution science, which explores the connection between GHG emissions and extreme weather events, can help to determine to what extent an event is caused by climate change. So it provides insights into how particular events are influenced by climate change. Then the findings of such analysis are critical to inform planning and decision-making processes. But even as we are looking at these findings, as scientists and decision makers, it has to be considered which populations are most exposed should the disaster occur. So climate science and attribution science can help in a number of ways, such as improved risk awareness, better preparedness, coming up with evidence-based policy, and determining what our priorities are in allocation of resources. But most of all, they show us that climate change is not a risk for future generations, which many of us tend to think it is, but it's a challenge that starts with us as the present generation. Then this stresses on the important role of research. There's need to invest in research, not just around climate science, but also, as Dr. Lukoba earlier stated, around other areas such as locust invasions, to come up with strategies to combat these problems. And then more research can also help to base our responses to disasters in a local context. Investing in research and science can help in coming up with not just mitigation, but also adaptation strategies. And finally, one other thing to take into account is coordinated planning. Work should be done across organizations, sectors, and levels for effective disaster risk management. We have to look at infrastructure, agriculture, environment, law, policy, practice, industry, among many other sectors. So finally, I must point out that my background is more law than science, so I'm by no means an expert on matters science. So for anything that I may have left out or not addressed sufficiently, additions are welcome, and thank you.
Thank you, Ashim. Well, we go to the next one. 5 minutes, please.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I want us to understand that coping with the disaster during COVID-19 is facing multi-hazard crisis. When we say multi-hazard crisis, we mean that a period in which a country is dealing with more than one crisis. Here, the question is not about which one has more impact on the society than the other. Rather, balancing between natural disaster and biological disaster. For example, in Kenya, in 2020, there is 194 deaths as a result of flooding, and the hundreds of thousands of people are displaced, but COVID-19 accounts for only 74 deaths. And we see it is closing down economy, affecting everything within the economy. So therefore, if you look at it from the angle of a number of people that died, you would say that, flooding has account for more people than COVID-19. But if you look at the impact on the economy, how this COVID-19 affected virtually every sector of the economy and virtually affecting everything within the economy, you can say that COVID-19 is having more impact on the society than the issue of natural disaster. However, it is not about which one is having the more impact or which one is having a less impact. So it is the balancing between this natural disaster and this biological disaster. And this can be done using the multi-hazard crisis, where government and the other responding agents may be required to make a complex and highly hierarchical decision aimed to balance this risk of the COVID-19 and the risk of the natural disaster. This COVID-19 makes our response to natural disaster difficult because it is reducing the risk mitigation measures and lowering the restriction of human activity to stimulate economic recovery. And this may alter the epidemiological dynamics and increase future risks relating to the natural disaster, and also make it difficult for us to deal with this COVID-19. So therefore, to reduce this risk of both a natural and the biological disaster, government has to employ what is called a multidimensional approach in dealing with this. Vis-a-vis the use of science for disaster risk management and the use of preparedness and the public awareness. However, there is a lot of challenges. These challenges may come as a result of inadequate funding, inadequate of researches, and inadequate of scientific solutions when it comes to dealing with this crisis. So the solution for this is government has to carry along each and every stakeholder within the society or within the economy in order to make policies that will come up with a robust solution irrespective of how are we going to generate data, how are we going to come up with some innovation using ICT in order to use this data and face these challenges. Then also, how are we going to fund research that will be proactive, not reactive, like what is happening now. What is happening now, we are more of reactive than proactive. We know this thing is coming, but we fold our arms and we did nothing. But if we take a proactive approach, it means that we are going to project what will happen in the near future, maybe, or in the 5 to 10 years time, and we deal with it. Then, apart from this funding for research, we have to upgrade our healthcare system and fund this primary healthcare. Example, in Nigeria, we have more than 10,000 primary healthcares, but the issue is these primary healthcares are under-equipped. They don't have the capacity, they don't have the equipment, and they don't even have the skills, that is the human resources, to help solve this issue of disaster, be it a natural disaster or a biological disaster like COVID-19. So at the end, essence is what are we doing, and why are we doing what we are doing, and are we doing the right thing? So these are the questions that we have to ask ourselves, and we have to engage our parliament as to what they are doing in order to cope with this natural disaster in the event of this COVID-19, which is a multi-hazard crisis that is facing our society. And Africa in particular are going to suffer in the future. But now in the present, Africa are not recording much issues in respect of this COVID-19. But when it comes to the issue of natural disaster, you see that now in Africa we are facing an issue more than the Western countries. So we have to balance these two, natural disaster and the biological disaster, at the end. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. Now we come to the end of our presentations, and we are going to go through the questions, and we can answer the questions according to the way they have come and to the specific presenters. So we have the first question to Lukoba, and Alfred Opere is asking, are these rockers edible? And also the other question that he wants to know is, let me read it. one of the challenge of COVID-19 within the population is good security. How can we take advantage of that? So are they edible? And then how do we take advantage of the security that we have seen with all these closures in the evenings and so on? How can we take advantage of that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof, for your questions. Yes, it's true. Locusts are edible. And yes, they can be. We can actually maybe use them to alleviate, or to increase our food security. But I think once you have seen a swarm, I doubt if you would really want to eat that many. And they can overwhelm you. I think that's my point. But they are edible if they came in enough, bits that we can take and keep and cook and so on. About security, I'm not sure what you meant by the security, but yes, we are having problems now with food security. Yes, we can. I believe we can use them for food security. Not only just for humans, but even for animals. Like I told you, chicken and various animals that we keep can actually use them for food. So in that way, yes.
Actually, I think the way I understand that one of the challenges now with COVID-19 within the population is good security. How can we take advantage? Probably because we have the curfews in the evening, or maybe it causes more insecurity or it causes more security. But the fact that everybody is in the house, how can we take advantage of this situation?
Actually, I saw he put somewhere, he meant food security.
Okay.
Yeah, so
right.
So I think I've answered.
Okay. So another question to you is, let me read it, is from I think Nancy, who is asking whether we should treat the locust disaster with the same with the same strength or as the COVID. Do we give it the same focus?
The same. Okay. Yes. We really need to treat it with the same focus, because just look at the amount of money that we require at the moment just to deal with this particular pandemic. We need 7.6 billion. Now, if we had been looking after the monitoring and surveillance in the right manner, because one of the things that happened is that there was some laxity in the surveillance because of political instability in certain countries, and therefore they could not get the surveillance information in time. But if we are able to get that information in time, then we can stop this kind of swarming and therefore save that kind of money. So we really need to be very serious about surveillance, because prevention is actually better than the cure we are trying to give.
Good, thank you. Another question to Professor Wadiga, which is sent by Mary Ogore, and is asking, what do you think COVID-19 has taught us about funding natural disaster? Professor Wadiga. Professor, is your mic on?
I'm okay. I'm now on.
Okay.
No, it's now on. Okay. What COVID-19 has taught us is that we were not prepared. And certainly in our next planning, we need to prepare much better for how we fund some of these health epidemics, or how we do research to give us information and warn us. And all of this will require investment, our local investment, no matter how small it is. But if we keep on investing, we will be moving forward in the way of understanding and prevention of disasters like the COVID-19. I think another thing which it has taught us is that a disaster can clamp down the economy completely and change it completely. And for that, we have to have strategies and people who are thinking of strategies on how we have disasters in economic sense. Do we wait for others to assist us, the developed countries to assist us, or do we use whatever small we have in a correct way to make sure that we have self-preparedness? Or is the clamping down of the economy the best way of handling this disaster or the other disaster? The answer is still not there, and we need to do research in all those areas.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. We have another question from Mary Ogore again to Professor Matua. And Mary is asking, sorry, let me get it right. Mary is asking whether, I am not getting there yet. You mentioned that natural disasters are opportunities. What opportunities do we have in the COVID-19? I think that's what she's asking. What opportunities do we have? Because you say there are opportunities even in disaster. Professor Matua.
Yes, Agnes, thanks very much. And if you allow me, I have just scanned the chart on my screen, and I have actually many charts that I can be able to summarize all of them instead of going one by one, because there are many. And if we go one by one, we perhaps will not be able to get there easily. I have charts from about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 6 persons. And I wanted to say, yes, and I can group these into 3 concerns that have been raised. One is the opportunities of COVID-19, which Professor Wandiga has already talked about, but I will want to add something to this. Then why don't we have focused risk management policies in Kenya? And that actually has been the concern of most. In fact, about 5 people are asking the same question on this. And the third one is what COVID-19 has taught us. Again, it came up with the Shem, and it also is coming to me. So those 3 main broad areas, and I wanted to ask to use this number 1, opportunities of COVID-19. And COVID-19 is a terrible thing that has actually come to us. But there are many opportunities that we perhaps are not seeing. I'm not seeing all of them. If you ask me now, when I'm seated down here, I would need to sit down perhaps a week or 2 to be able to explore all the opportunities. But there are very many opportunities. I was just thinking and telling my family the other day, I drive an old Peugeot car, and when I went to Mombasa after the El Nino time, when the road was finished, it was very dusty and the holes and everything, and my Peugeot was leaking dust like you have never seen. And I was borrowing the lasso from my wife, it was not working, and so on. God, I should have just used a mask, a simple thing of only 50 shillings, and I would have gotten out of this mess. And I perhaps will use a mask now, even if we were declared free of this. There are many opportunities. So one opportunity that this thing has given us is knowledge. Although we are realizing there are many things we don't know. But we also have many opportunities have come with this COVID-19. we spend a lot of time on the roads in jam, going to the office and going back from the office to home. Huge jams. Why is it that we go to the offices and we are doing most of what we want to do while we are here at home? This conference we are having would have been extremely expensive and complicated had there not been COVID. But here we are doing it so easily. I am now tempted to say, I even don't want to come to Nairobi. I will do all my lectures here, except only when I'm doing demonstrations. It's an opportunity that has come, and it will save the country if we take that direction, save country a lot of finances in terms of economy. Why don't we have focused risk management policies? Believe me, I do not know. Why? Simply because policies in Kenya are politically driven. They are not institutionally driven. And it is a high time institutions started driving policies in this country rather than letting politicians drive policies. And many times I am proud the environmental policy that has been creating a lot of problems. In another project that I had, I was able to bring a lot of these MPs, the Environmental Committee of Parliament, into a conference, in a sitting, and we were able to drive a holistic policy that is good, although still it hasn't gone through because of many things. Somehow, universities are not playing, the institutions are not playing their key role in driving what happens in this country. We are leaving it all to politicians to do it, and we then sit back and say we are not doing the right thing. It's the main thing. Why we do not have specific. There is no good reason, absolutely no excuse at all. We should have. And in preparing the policies for this focused one, there is a chapter. Many of us who know how to write policies, there's a chapter which they call cross-cutting issues. And in that chapter, that's where you would integrate so that you have strategies for dealing with that particular one in an environment of integration. It's easy, and I would want one or two of us to get together to see whether we can be able to drive a pandemic policy. And because they are there, Shema said this is not the last. The world is fighting for power. Whoever wins the COVID will be a millionaire. And therefore somebody else is fighting for something else we don't know, for the monies. So these pandemics will be there, and it is a high time we know somebody puts it down as a policy to deal with the pandemics, viral pandemics. So what has COVID-19 taught us? That we are not prepared. We are generally not prepared for any disaster. Disasters have a tendency just to hit us when we are seated down. Why? Because our policies and strategies are on the reactive. They are not on the proactive. This is the problem again of universities. We are not fighting for our space. We should be fighting in the MTPs, planning for monies to participate in government planning for the proactive preparedness of these disasters and risks. We have not been doing it. We don't fight for our space. We wait until politicians come in, they develop a policy which is reactive at the other end. So we have learned preparedness is a big issue, and we have learned that we can use the opportunity of internet, and there are many other opportunities that we can do. Give me a week and I will be able to find many of those. And I think I have answered about 5 or 6 of the chats that have been floated to me. Thanks, Agnes. Agnes, are you with me?
Hello, sorry, my mic was off. My apologies. I am seeing like you have answered most of the questions that were there in the chat, unless maybe the presenters can indicate any question that has been directed to them and has not been handled? Do we have any? Lukoba? You have any question that has not been handled?
No, I don't have any.
Okay. And Dr. Mutemi?
Thank you, Prof, our moderator, for this. Definitely, a lot has been commented on, and I just want to respond to an issue raised by Emma Wisman, the practical ways of taking advantage of these approaches and holistic engagement, which we are seeing as the way forward in addressing societal issues and challenges. And thankfully, this is what our two panelists have also strongly highlighted. So I wish to also appreciate them, Aspan and Hamed, for those encouraging, thoughtful inputs and prompts to our audience. And truly, I want to reflect this on the perspective of maybe the new Kenyan government approach, this thing of public participation. And I guess public participation, of course, this is like in the context of institutional mandates and roles and responsibilities. And a time has come when we have now realized that when I'm doing very deep science, as I showed there, I'm calculating vorticity and divergence and moisture flux and all manner of things, which are purely only sensible to me. But this has everything to do with the social scientist who needs to plan how the communities are going to be affected there. Now we are moving into the cold disease only, for example. Yeah, true. This is almost going to be our winter. Starting this June and all the way to, and there is a lot to do together in terms of factoring, for example, the cold surges which are going to be afflicting us from Southern Africa in coping with the management of COVID and of course other respiratory diseases. My own example, for example, I am usually coughing. Sorry for this, so I don't think I'm welcome anywhere. And we have a lot to do together. So I see a good window of opportunity, for example, to take advantage on. Let me, I applaud, for example, during the peak of the flooding disasters, at least our interior CS, Matiangi, would, before commending, you would see the director of Kenya Med Services by his side, first of all, giving the technical input, again from the policy level dimension, meaning that in the background there, we scientists have actually cooperated and done all that technical work which needs to be done. So really, we are moving in that direction. It is a paradigm shift, and I think this is the way to go so that all disciplines work together, and you realize that we are able to build those structures which actually cushion societies much better. We will become more prepared, and they will actually even have fallback positions. Should we be hit by who knows what's going to come after COVID in terms of a new challenge? We don't know, but the thing is to be prepared. The thing is to have the will to address issues together, and of course ask together the question, what if? And each discipline bring onto the table their perceived expert opinion of the what if, and I think informed decisions, good data sets, well synthesized and distilled information will take society very, very far. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daktari. Thank you for that explanation. Maybe I really like the idea when you say that you really have to, you can predict the weather almost to the point, not like the way it was in the 90s and a bit earlier on. And this, you actually said it's more because you have data sets that are able to give you the prediction. And one of the things you said is that you need to network to get that kind of data at a global scale. We, in my area of study, we have been really debating over data sharing and how you can release data to each other and so on. And it has been a long discussion. How have you been able to solve this problem within the meteorological group, and to be able to use, because I see it is very important that we should be able to share the data because we get a lot more information out of it. But it is very difficult to share data because we want to get our data and publish before we can release it to the public. How do we deal with that? Or how have you dealt with that in the NET team?
Thank you very much, moderator, for such a forward-looking and, of course, important question to us, and also our audience to chip in. In fact, if our audience were able to comment, I would request Emma Wisman. I think if she's able to comment on the whole concept of co-production and what is the spirit of all this, what comes out when people come together, share standard operating procedures, everybody come together, and how we integrate and how we actually end up benefiting by getting out of our own small boxes, out of the box approach. Is Emma, can you respond? Maybe if you can't talk, you can put a remark on the chat. Thank you, Emma.
We can allow Emma to unmute and give an answer.
Certainly. Yeah, Emma can give her good reflections on this.
Thank you very much, Joseph. I hope everybody can hear okay. Thank you very much. I feel honoured to even talk alongside such brilliant presentations. I found them very, very enlightening. I'd only say that in terms of co-production, it is a bit of a buzzword at the moment, but actually what it does provide is bringing together different knowledge from across different sectors, expertise. And so it really provides this opportunity, as Joseph was saying, to share learning across both the sectors of climate science, meteorology, whether it's agriculture, whether it's to do with pandemics. It really provides an opportunity to bring together learning from across different expertise. And the one thing I would only add to what's already been really fully presented was that it allows also to bring in local knowledge about how these issues affect people at a local area. So often the science is at quite a high level, and for people to really use it, we need to contextualize it. So that's the only thing that I would add to what you're already saying. That it really provides an opportunity to engage with people directly who are affected. And by doing that, we create knowledge that people are more likely to use. So thank you very much indeed. And I really support the integrated approaches presented. And I think it's not easy, but it is very exciting to be able to create new knowledge. And I really agree. I think COVID and the locusts and flooding and all these disasters often provide opportunities for significant change. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you, our moderator.
Sorry. Thank you, Emma. Thank you very much for that contribution. Yes, Dr. Mutemi, you are saying something?
Yeah, I just want then to start encouraging ourselves. The way forward, of course, the holistic approach is to not only to build the roads but also the bridges and strengthen them, and we have to build the concept of it is not my business, it's our business. So we really have to go the way of appreciating, the diverse disciplines have their strengths and their weaknesses, but there is the concept of making the mix work, as it were, so that various actors, various professionals see the need to come together to draft the policies, for example, to generate the knowledge which translates to routine services to societies. And I think the way to go, of course, is to really explore innovatively the pathways to increasing cross-disciplinary holistic approach. They are everything to do with the legal issues. So for the first time, you may find a chemist having to really sit together with a legal tutor and professor, and working together on the seamless cascade of knowledge from manufacturing to how it impacts on likely litigations and things like this. And ultimately, what is the transformational entry point? What are we leaving behind in terms of a better society? So I think this is, I wanted to make this one as the practical way of our engagements across various disciplines in the physical sciences, in the biological sciences. And I think that is probably the motivation which the organizers of this forum had in mind, at least to bring together not only sciences, but also the lawyers in between. And I think we can make much more progress if we keep this circle growing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mutemi. There is a question here that what policies or best practices can Kenya borrow from the international community when dealing with natural disasters? I think you may have dealt with that, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit more.
Yes, Agnes, I had actually seen that chart from Mwangi, and it has been really bothering me a little bit. Yes, we have instruments. In my mind, when I think of the instruments that the Mississippi River Commission, the River Commission is taking to minimize the issues of flooding, it's commendable, and I would recommend that whoever is going to look at the flood issues should quickly refer and consult that. But I have given students to review many of these policies, all the way from Mississippi in America to Danube, Rhine, and all that. And interestingly, they come with huge flaws, huge areas where they are not being taken. Particularly, you see America as a wonderful, flood management system for the Mississippi. And it was flooding just recently, and the COVID made it even worse. Why? Because their instrument, their strategy was weak. It did not incorporate pandemics. The Americans didn't foresee this coming. And therefore it was bad. There is no perfect instrument anywhere in the world. What is perfect is what you construct at that point and you build on it. It is not good. I'm not one person who prescribes to borrowing instruments from other people. I prefer, difficult as it is, challenging as it is, we do ours. We have the minds and the power to do it. This issue of importing things is not one of my favorite things to do. The other thing that I want to mention that is related to this that Sinjay Mwangi has raised is, all of us have heard the statement, what does not kill you makes you stronger. In fact, one of my sons one time told me, I am the total sum of the mistakes that I have made in my life. And it scares me, those two statements scare me a lot. We in Kenya have made many mistakes. This pandemic caught us a little bit unawares. There were a few things that we were not able to do right. Lots of mistakes we have done in our lives as Kenyans. We did mistakes, huge mistakes during the 98, 97, 98 El Nino. We did huge mistakes during the 2000 drought, 2001, huge mistakes. But what did we learn from it so that we can claim to be stronger? What does not kill you makes you stronger. But we keep hearing of Budalangi. We keep hearing even of this COVID thing. And when you look at when it started, we were very active. Oh, we want to keep away, and you even don't want to hug anybody, not just to a wife or friend. But then that memory died very quickly. That is a characteristic which is killing us. We respond very quickly, reactive. We respond very quickly, but we forget our memory of anything is very low. And therefore, we need, as universities, to find a culture of sustaining experience. No need to accumulate experience and then later on you die because of the same exposure at this point. So I prescribe to a Kenyan-made policy, flood policy, pandemic policy, without borrowing anything. This issue of borrowing is not one of my strong points. It may be a weak point, but I strongly subscribe to it. Sorry about those extreme feelings, but thanks, Agnes.
Professor Odiga, you are muted. Unmute your mic.
Exactly, he has to unmute his mic.
I'm now allowed to unmute it. I've been trying. One of the things, which is very useful to me, is that developing a society and the governance is not a preserve of politicians only. We have seen the example of some of the managed COVID countries, like Germany. They included everybody in the process of managing the epidemic or pandemic. In Kenya, other societies, other centers of knowledge are only thought of after the event. They are not included in the process. And what we are crying for is, yes, politics is important, but excess politicking is destructive. Let us be inclusive in national affairs and national government. Thank you.
I think, yes, thank you very much. Agnes, maybe our panelist, our moderator, has connectivity challenge.
Joseph, take off. Take over, Joseph.
Thank you. As we wait for moderator, our moderator.
Moderator,
I think we
are finished.
We are very close to the end. Just before moving towards his final remarks of our webinar, I can look at the list of our participants. I think our audience is quite rich. I see actors.
Looks like nobody is talking.
No, nobody is talking. So probably this is the time to take stock of what we have learned out of this webinar in terms of way forward and a holistic approach to societal addressing societal challenges has come out clearly, building bridges between various disciplines ranging from sciences, physical, biological, to social sciences. We can team together and we can have a very concerted outcomes in terms of the way we apply our disciplines to guide and address societal issues. Collaborations with international partners is very effective. We learn from each other. There is opportunity for technological transfer, north, south, east, west. This is an opportunity which we can take forward. And I think in the context of advancing operations, partnership between people and experts in mandated agencies, research institutions, and also general public have a long way to do in terms of working together to develop those products which, of course, indicate the kinds of transformational impacts our outputs can give to society. And I think these are my closing remarks in this particular webinar. I wish to thank sincerely our speakers. Before I thank the speakers, I see Mwangi. Yeah, I think that is true. The connectivity is a challenge, but I think we have covered good ground. We have gotten useful comments from our audience and our panelists, and I wish to appreciate all of them on behalf of our moderator, Professor Agnes Mudhumbi of the School of Biological Sciences, our chair in the School of Physical Sciences research week preparations, our two professors, basically our pride in terms of keeping scientists interested in fruitful engagements in scientific undertaking. So I really, again, wish to thank Professor Shem Wadinga, Professor Francis Matua for the opportunity you have had to give your valuable time into this engagement and press kind of appearance through this webinar. And of course, the School of Law for the Committee Fiscal Planning, which spearheads this organization. And to all our audience, you are very much appreciated. May you all have a fruitful happy day. And I think the convener will check the material recorded, and at an appropriate time it will be shared with the wider public. Thank you very much. May you
thank you, Dr. Mutemi. Thank you, Dr. Mutemi. I managed to come back. Thank you very much.
Close for us then. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. We are very grateful for all the presenters and for all the participants who have come in to listen. Thank you for the presentation, and you have given us another view of the disasters, the climate change, the Locust disasters, and the COVID-19. And as a university, I think we have to look through and see where can we fit in, because as Professor Matua said, we are losing we are not taking our place, and we need to take our place so that we can direct the policies development in this country. I would have liked to ask how do we do that, but it looks like our time is running out. I would have liked Professor Matua to explain to us how do we take our place so that we do not lose out completely, maybe in half a minute.
Yeah, well, Agnes, you have there got me a little bit on my unawares a little bit. But you see, in some years, and Shem will agree with me, some years back, we had research committees and all coordinated from the DVCs. Almost in all the universities, we had research committees. Those research committees, many of them have died because of lack of support, either internal support or external support. Only a few are remaining in the colleges. And therefore, this issue of research in our national universities has kind of died down and has been overtaken by the module 2 and this internet teaching that we are doing today. It's a high time we brought back these committees, whether paid or not. We got those who are in the university, we all got into this because of the willingness to change, to bring in knowledge into the world. And that knowledge, that calling was not for money. And therefore, it is a high time that we in the universities in Kenya, all the universities and institutions of higher learning should somebody, Shem is much more senior than I have, somebody needs to ignite all activities, every force. Somebody says for every action there must be a force behind it. In order to reactivate this, we perhaps need somebody, either you, Agnes, or Shem, or somebody, to push the button for these things to be able to move forward. It is very important that we have these research committees, and the research committees were good. We lost something in the universities that is very valuable. Collaboration, which has been part of the problems that we are seeing today. We are not collaborating. We are not. When I'm trying to come to Nairobi, the police people ask me, why are you going to Nairobi? It is, you are going to die. You are an old man. I tell them I want to go and do some research on these floods and COVID. They say, no, we don't want you to go there on only floods. We want you to go there only on COVID, and you do not know biology. Therefore, we are not allowing you in. This collaboration thing is so weak, even in the minds of not only the decision makers, but also in our researchers. And Agnes, Shem, I am throwing the ball to you.
Thank you very much. And I think with that remark, we have been challenged. We need to come back together and work together as a team so that our place is not taken away and we are contributing to the country. I think we'll come to the end of this session, and I believe there will be another one next week or the week after, which we should join in. Thank you very much, and thank you to the Committee on Fiscal Studies for this good work they are doing. Thank you very much. Kwaheri.
Thank you very much. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.